The QBD Podcast.
The Marketing PowWow.
Robots and humans are both really important when creating content. You need to be able to explain why you do what you do, pose a question and answer it quite quickly. If you're doing that, you've got more chance. Write original content, have a view, have an understanding, demonstrate that understanding. If you're relying on this AI content, then you are going to suffer massively at the hand of the robots. You have to write it as a human, otherwise it just isn't going to work.
Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Paul Dyer about marketing to robots. If you haven't done so already, be sure to check out part 1, and you can find that on our website at qbd.co.uk/powwow. So let's get into the Marketing PowWow.
The QBD Podcast.
The Marketing PowWow.
Just one thing I want to almost bring it back to a little bit, or change tact a bit, is around the AI with sort of content creation, and where are we with that in terms of people sort of leaning on AI and the growth of AI around content creation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've said this many times in various pieces of content that I've created and written myself, and other podcasts in the studio, where if you're relying on AI content for your website, then you are not going to have success in the longer term. People, when ChatGPT, particularly version 3 hit, people were jumping on that quite quickly. There was lots of sort of advisors who were saying, hey, you can now use this wonderful piece of software to create content and all sorts of things, and it will be wonderful, and it's great at what it does. It's a great product. I'm not saying it's not. It has a place. But if you're using AI to generate your content for your website almost exclusively, then you will fail. Yeah. And I've not been short and coming forward. No,
you've
I've made that statement loads of times in various roadshows and presentations, and it's been proven over and over again. And in fact, the big index update that we saw from Google back in sort of March, April time this year was an area where it really, really hit hard on AI only generated content. Yeah. And bear in mind that 90% ish of the AI content that gets generated, maybe more than that. In fact, historically, 100% of the content that got generated by AI was purely, if you like, a refabrication of content that was already out there. So there was nothing new. So from a search engine's point of view, if it's polling across various websites, it's saying nothing new, nothing new, nothing new, nothing new. Heard it before. Unoriginal. Yeah. Heard it before, seen it before, nothing new. So it's really important that you understand how you use AI correctly in the way that you use it as a tool for your website content creation. We use AI in QBD for creation of structures. So we might say, for example, we need to create a piece of content about something. What would be a good structure to use for this? AI is really good at giving you structures. It's a good research tool. It's very good at giving you things that you hadn't thought about necessarily bringing into the article. But if you then ask it to write the content in each of those structures, that's where you fail. Yeah. You must then write that content yourself from a experience-based perspective and an authority.
It comes back to your point about authority, because it can't demonstrate your authority, and that's something that I've been speaking to people a lot about recently. Is it's that there will be businesses out there that are using AI to create their content, and they will ultimately fail, but they can essentially pretend to be you. They can do the same things, but what they can't do is talk about your experiences and position themselves as the authority of both yourself, and that's what you've really got to cut through, haven't you?
You've got to cut through it. And quite often what happens is when AI and a client end up doing some research together, shall we say, then you end up with what is really the frequently asked questions around that topic. And AI will come back and write some content around the frequently asked questions. And one of the things that differentiates the real expert in the room from someone that is just listing the frequently asked questions is when you talk about the should have asked questions, the things that they should be asking about. So they come along with the same questions that everyone's asking, and your content is just answering that. That doesn't make you an expert. That just makes you one of the crowd, if you like. When you go back and say, actually what you should be asking about is this. And this is because we have expertise, we have experience, we're an authority, and we've done this lots of times before, so we're trustworthy. When you come back with those things, which incidentally is the EEAT that we try and follow, which is a Google instruction. When you come back with that, people start to listen, and the robots also will listen because it's getting new information. It's getting something that wasn't there before. And the other thing that we can often look to bring into these content areas is, sort of like results and stats around something. So rather than just go with, again, what's already out there, maybe use your experience looking, maybe do your own research within your own sort of website experiences or things that are working for you and percentage wise. And then say, for example, we're seeing a 40% increase in indexing by using this technique, or we're seeing a 28% increase in connections with our customers when we're talking about this and this and this. So it's having your own data that you can bring in, which is unique to you and your own viewpoint on it, which is so important.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, if you're just using AI to create content, even if you're then reading it through and checking it, it's still not good enough, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just a thought that's come to my head, actually. Obviously, this whole topic that we're speaking about today is marketing to robots. But there's no point using a robot to help you market to robots because you're not telling the robot anything different. It already knows what you're about to tell it.
That's an absolutely brilliant way of looking at it. And, yes, you're quite right that if the robot created the content and it's created that version of that content a million times already and it's already out there, it's going to know. So if you're asking that robot now to take you seriously as an originator of content, it's not going to do that because, I'm sorry, it's just regurgitating the same old stuff that's out there, and you're not adding any value. And it's the adding value, isn't it? It's got to happen.
Yeah. I think the adding value thing is an interesting point, is it? Because I know it's an example that you worked on a while ago with around the company that was doing resin driveways, because you could see them probably would have gone down a similar route. They just could have asked it was a long time ago that we did the work for them. But it was that experience, that knowledge that we had, that we could help them, that actually you don't just talk about your subject matter. You need to think of these different angles, isn't it? And AI is not really going to give you that angle, is it really?
And that's almost back to the sort of semantics of all of this, really, because, the particular client that you're referring to was many years ago, and a client that I did the original SEO work for. And when I stumbled across, when they asked me to look at their website and I started looking at their content that they'd already created and added to the site, they spoke an awful lot about resin, and it was keyword stuffing process almost. It was resin driveways. And I went back to them and said that we need to talk about other types of driveways, and the most popular driveway that exists in the UK for sure is block paving. And I said, you need to have content around block paving. And they were quite reluctant in the first instance to do that because, they said, well, no, we don't do block paving. And I said, well, yeah, but you need to write about it. And only if you need to write about it in terms of the benefits of resin over block, you need to talk about block paving. You need to have that. You need to be an authority in all aspects of what you do in order to elevate your particular area of expertise and the reasons why you do now what you do. People buy on your why, don't they? And we often talk about this. So just saying we just do this in itself is not enough. You need to be able to explain why you do what you do. And having explained from a content point of view where you've come from in the thinking to end up at this particular type of product that is going to be better performing than another is an important part of understanding the semantics of creating content and understanding why it's important to talk about the whole subject and not just the bit that you do. People often talk about who they are and what they do. They don't talk about who they are, what they do, and why they do it. And it's the why that's often missing. And that was a classic example. And when we did go back and we changed all of that content and we started adding in all of the other areas around driveways and why, what makes a good driveway and why it's important, everything from drainage to, the process, nobody wants their driveway to be a mess for weeks. So, the process you go through, how quick and efficient they are at doing what they do, and the quality of their work, and the testimonials and case studies that we could put together for them. When all of that came together, wow.
That's your authority.
Yeah, that's the authority. And in fact, in their particular case, they had to take on more trucks and more people because suddenly the work they were getting, they couldn't believe the inquiry levels that were coming through. All we did was broaden the subject.
Yeah.
That's all we did, and it worked.
For the people that are listening today, could they just think, okay, great, I'll just go and create one piece of content and really sort of try and demonstrate my authority with just one blog? Would that do it for them or not?
I think probably most people would understand that it's not enough in its own right. They would need to have the more content, the better. Well, back to that statement I made earlier that a website is just words and pictures. So, if you don't have any words or not enough words, it's becoming a problem for both a human and a robot. I think one of the things that we've been doing now for a little while is something that's not new. It's been around for many years, really. Is something that we might refer to as a piece of pillar content. And this is a classic example, really, where we would say, again, almost back to the driveways business we talked about earlier, is talking about the whole thing was important, and that was kind of like a pillar approach. So what we would say is that it's really important to think about who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and all of the issues around your market sector, what are the drivers in the market, et cetera, the decision makers, or the decision making aspects of buying in your sector, and you need to create content around all of that. Good and bad. You need to have those should ask questions in there as well as the frequently asked stuff. And you build this, you can build a huge piece of content. I mean, we would often build a piece of content that is between 4,000 and 6,000 words as a piece of pillar content. And that piece of pillar content will touch on all aspects of your sector that you want to talk about in this particular case. So, if we take what we do, for example, one of the areas of our business is web design. So we might create a piece of pillar content around web design and cover all aspects of web design. Whether it's just the fonts and the colors, or whether it's the sort of structure you use for the site itself, the navigation structure and so forth. There are so many things we could talk about in there. So we might be able to create, 4,000-6,000 words around this with really good detailed content, but not so detailed that you don't leave somewhere else to go. So we would advocate for maybe some what we call pillar content. And once you've created that pillar content, you can then create other pieces of content that drill down further. So for example, website design, a clear area of website design which is really important is navigation. We might touch on it in the pillar content, but then we might have a separate piece of content we write which is maybe 1,000 words, 1,500 words, which is just about how to create a good website navigation system for your website. What are the important factors? Those two pieces of content now live in the same space. One is your all-encompassing sort of pillar content, which can be used to create so many other bits of content and link back and forth together and exist in one of those trees that you talked about earlier. So it's understanding how, again, the semantics of all of this work in terms of the language that we use, the way that we create large pieces of content that can then create subsections of content for itself, and how, again, those can be used maybe in social media with very short pieces of content, or how some of that could be used in emails to drive business back to the main content area. An example of that would almost be what we're doing now, because going back a few weeks ago, I wrote a piece for our own website, which is looking at this whole aspect of marketing to robots and why it's important. And by the time this podcast goes out, that would have been published. There will be a link from that, and that's really a pillar piece of content that's I would advocate you go and read, because it's really worthwhile and it touches on a lot of things we've been talking about. It's a really useful reminder in there as well. So that piece of content, which is a pillar content, is being linked to this podcast, which we're creating. It will also go on to link to other articles. We can link it back into articles that already exist in our sort of structure. And we can create from that, we can create emails that we can use to go out to clients to say, have you considered, have you looked at this from this point of view? Go and read this article or listen to the podcast. And we can do that across social media as well. So no, just creating one piece of content in itself and publishing it is not enough. You need to think about the whole digital market and how you can tie this together. And again, the robots are going to look for all those signals. It's going to say, is this just a piece of content in its own right? Or does it link to other pieces of content that are relevant to this that I can also, relate to people and suggest that they consider this in the results that I'm indexing? Are there social signals around it? One of the things that we build authority around is other people sharing your content, other people saying, I read this content the other day, they're writing on their own website. I read this content around marketing to robots written by Paul Dyer at QBD. You must go and read it. It's a really interesting piece of content. They link from their website to us. That gives us all recommendation. It gives us authority. Google looks for, or search engines look for, other people recommending you. It's a massive thing that it looks for, that builds authority and trust. Yeah,
I think that's the thing, isn't it? That again, when we've spoken to people about this, that you sort of open their eyes to is Google can see all that. They can see that cluster, as we call it, isn't that sort of content cluster around the pillar piece of content, the podcast, the YouTube video, the social media post. All of it is part of the mix, isn't it, to create those signals? Yes, absolutely. And if you've got in your business, you've got 5 core services, and each of those services has 3 or 4 sub things that it does. You might want to consider pillar marketing, not just for the 5 core services, but for each of those sub things that it does as a pillar, and then that each can spread out into other content. And if we look at the most successful websites that we run for people and where we build their content, it's the people that follow this. Yep. The people that believe in us, the people that say yes, we think that will work, that actually invest in that way. And it is an investment. It's not a cost, because if we take many of our clients that have invested in a content strategy around pillar content, good technical SEO, good, interfacing to the robots and so forth, that if they've gone on that journey with us, they've done exceptionally well. And actually, once they've built that, it's kind of hangs around for a very long time. It sticks, and they can ease off on that, and basically they reduce their ongoing costs and not spend quite so much moving forward, because they've built this enormous content base, which is driving loads of organic traffic to the website. I suppose it's about identifying all those sort of different entities almost of that content and then connecting them all up. Can you just talk through a little bit more of the value of connecting those entities together? It's around that authority around a particular subject. If you've created just one piece if you've written a relatively, good, but let's say quite shallow piece of content around the benefits of a particular service that you're offering, or why something works in a certain way, then that's okay, and it may show up somewhere down the line, and you could push it across yourself on social media a little bit and so forth. When you've built something that's huge in terms of the pillar content that we talked about earlier, the 4,000-6,000 words, if you like, or even more, and you've created maybe another 10-15 articles around that, which are all 1,000 words each, or at least 800 to 1,000 words each, you've now got this enormous cluster of content, and all of that is going to link together in some way. It's all going to, you're going to have links from your main content into your sub content and so forth. All of that's going to work together, and this builds the authority of your knowledge and understanding and expertise around that. And, Google gave us EEAT as a guideline. It was updated a year or so ago, and you can download a copy by going to our own website and /EEAT, and you can download a copy of the guidelines yourself and see it. And it tells us what we need to do. And it understands that we understand from what Google is telling us, that if we create well-indexed content where we show expertise and experience in all of that,
it will rate us much higher than someone that doesn't. So again, having that cluster and linking it all together builds that authority and meets the guidelines that we're trying to set.
Yeah. You touched on it earlier around sort of AI and the different uses of it, but obviously another side of AI is how it is impacting search. And for those people that are listening, I'm sure you've seen it if you use Google recently with AI overviews and AI mode that are coming in, but also the people that we speak to, certainly I speak to, they are using tools like ChatGPT as almost the search engine, aren't they, to ask questions. So how is content feeding into that? How is the content you're creating being sort of picked up by those AI searches? Okay,
so the good news is that if you are ranking well in Google, generally speaking, and we're specifically talking about AI mode and AI overviews, which is a Google product, then you will rank. You'll probably rank reasonably well in AI overviews, or you will start to rank. However, if you know how it works and you are not currently ranking particularly well, you're on page 30, you're ranking on 30th, if you like. So you're in the top 30, but you're not on page 1. If you understand how it works, you can quickly get yourself elevated actually into AI overviews. It's probably too complicated to go into great detail here. And again, it's something that you can follow up with us individually if you want to. But essentially what you're really doing is trying to structure or restructure the content that you have slightly differently to suit the way that these AI search engine results are being indexed. And the principle for that is that you put a lot of the relevant content at the top of the page. I think it's important that, in a lot of cases we see content. I mean, YouTube is an example of this, and I've been talking about YouTube as obviously a search engine and SEO on YouTube for a long time. And I remember going back years ago when Google first got involved in YouTube. Google started to index YouTube, and it could understand a bit of what was being said and a bit of what was being shown on a YouTube video. But it was typically only scanning the first 10, 15 seconds. So if you didn't say what this video was about in the first 10, 15 seconds, the chances of showing up in the Google search results with the YouTube video was pretty low. It's got better at that now, and it's capable of indexing much more and scanning much more as its own crawlability is improved, and it's getting better at indexing images and text within these formats. But essentially, the same rules apply. And in fact, the best application of this is where a YouTube video starts, not with a long jingle and a logo and everything else and, hey, YouTubers, what's happening, which is typically what they do. Yeah. It's cutting straight in and says, hey, today I'm going to explain to you why you must be doing this and not be doing that. Stick around to find out more. Brilliant, because in the first 10, 15 seconds, the user understands what they're going to get to find out about, and the robots understand what this video and content is all about. And it's more likely to index than the rest of the video and find the subbits that then it shows back. And AI overviews and AI mode are not really greatly different from that. So if your content is waffling away talking about who you are and where you live and how many kids you've got and where you went to school and everything else, and people, believe me or not, they do write this stuff. Consultants often write an awful lot about themselves before they go into what they are actually doing, because they feel they need to build credibility around themselves as an individual. That will never rank in AI overviews. You need to hit your content sharply and quickly with statements. You need to pose a question and answer it quite quickly. If you're doing that, you've got more chance. But good SEO is still good SEO. And if you're not ranking in the top 30, chances are you're not going to slip in.
Yeah, you still need that foundation, don't you?
You need the foundation to be there. You need the trustworthy, and all that stuff needs to be right. But then you can further tweak your content quite easily and quite well to suit the AI overviews, AI mode search results. And where we're working with clients on this, and we've been working with clients on this for a long time, before it even really became a thing, we started to work on it in its beta mode, if you like, when Google SGE was just being sort of talked about. We were pioneering some of the research and found out how to do it. We were one of the first people to find out how this works. And we were getting great search results for small UK-based companies in America in Google SGE results when it wasn't even in the UK. So yeah, we understand how to do that. And in fact, some of the articles that we create on our own website, within sometimes hours actually of being created and published, we can get them onto the top of search, and we can get them to appear in AI overviews.
Yeah, it's a really important element to it, isn't it? And we both share a love of analogies and using things to help explain people. I was giving a talk recently, and it was to a sort of younger demographic, or younger age people, and I use the old analogy of, we got to Ron seal it. You got to do what you say on the tin. You've really got to state it. Now, it turns out most of the audience I was talking to didn't actually know what Ron seal was, so I had to spend about 5 minutes explaining what Ron seal was, which was not kind of the point of the story. But yeah, there's a really clear thread, isn't there, with everything we've spoken about today? Is you just got to be really clear about who you are, what you do, and making that very why you do it, and making it very clear and easy for the search engines and AI tools to understand that.
Yes.
And then you've got a better chance of
and be original.
Yeah.
Write original content, have a view, have an understanding, demonstrate that understanding.
Yeah.
Those are really important factors in this.
Yeah. The other point I just wanted to get your thoughts on really was around, I know we touched on it already, with the businesses using AI to create that content, and that sort of content, that AI content trap that people can fall into. What are those traps and pitfalls that you've seen when businesses have thought, okay, I'll just get AI to create the content for me?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered this a little bit, and if you're relying on this AI content, then you are going to suffer massively at the hand of the robots. Again, the AI content that you create will have been written by a robot. Brother and sister of the robot that's now going to crawl your website to actually go through that content and index it. So again, if it's not original and it's not in depth and it doesn't bring anything new to the party, then the robots are largely going to ignore that content.
Yeah.
The other important aspect of AI-based content is the human element. If you've got to bring that human element in, and even people that are creating the content using AI and then checking it over and tweaking it a bit, thinking, I'll just bring that word or two in just to give it a word around, so it's different and it looks like I've edited it in some way. It's not enough.
No.
And, you can't game the system with this. So the human element is really, really important to get right. And it's really important to understand who you are and bring in your voice into this content. Your own guide, the way that you speak is really important. And if it's been written by an AI chatbot, even if you've given it a style of writing, it's still not going to be.
It's not come from the. It's not come from the core, and that touches on the podcast that I did recently with John, that people can go back and listen to if they want, around that importance of that tone of voice. And if you start with your why and you start with your tone of voice and move forwards, you're going to set yourself up better than sort of trying to tweak and sort of bend robot content that's never really going to work.
Exactly that. And John, our head of content, a brilliant author, but also very good at it within the podcast explaining why all this is important. And I do recommend people go and listen to that. But it's absolutely right. As a digital agency and a web design company, one of the first things we do is create a tone of voice document. And that tone of voice document, it defines you as a business, why you do what you do, who you are, and, if you like, the language that we're going to use to describe and talk about anything. And when we've got that tone of voice document, we can use that to create any piece of content. We can refer back to our TOV, as we call it, the tone of voice, to understand how to write this subject. And you're never going to get that from a ChatGPT driven piece of content. It's never going to be able to understand your tone of voice. You can train it, of course you can. There are things you can do, but ultimately the nuances that are really created within the human brain has to come out on that piece of paper as an original piece of work. And it's the originality that's
how should
important.
be that authentic?
It's being authentic, isn't it? Absolutely. And if you can't be that, I'm sorry, you're just not going to rank. No. You have to write it as a human, otherwise it just isn't going to work.
Well, thanks, Paul. As always, when speaking to you about these subjects, it's always really fascinating and getting your insights on it. For businesses that are listening, feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed by all of this, what would be your key takeaways for them?
The key takeaways really have to be: don't rely on AI content. We've talked about that a lot. And understanding that we're living not in a world which is robots first and humans seconds, or humans first and robots second. It's actually a world that exists where robots and humans are both really important when creating content. And so one of my key takeaways has to be that, create original content, write it yourself, or have it written by a content writer, better still, who understands all of this stuff. Understand that we're living in a world where we have to market to those robots and humans, and if we ignore either, we will fail. And understand that the digital gatekeeper is there. We're living in a world where the first people that are going to read your content, apart from a colleague who might check it or whatever, but the first online entity that will read your content is going to be a robot. And it will then make a decision that will affect the life cycle of that piece of content for potentially years to come. So getting it right, and getting it right first time, and if it isn't right first time, going in and modifying it and understanding what you need to change is really important. So please do not just create a piece of content, publish it to your website and hope. If you're doing that, you're living in a world where other people are just so much better at doing that than you are. You are not going to be able to compete. One of the important things to remember is that discovery leads persuasion. If you're in a position where you've created a great piece of content, but nobody's actually seeing it, it doesn't matter. It's better to have a piece of content that is discovered and seen rather than purely trying to persuade people to read something. So it's understanding, again, how to make these things indexable and crawlable and to show up. We often talk about in business, we say, you've got to show up. If you want to be in the game, you've got to show up. And again, making content discoverable is critical, because if it's not being discovered, you're not showing up. Technical excellence is non-negotiable. And again, if you are in a situation where you're creating great content, but it's sat on top of a platform that is not performing from a technical aspect, it's got errors in the code, it's not on a good server where pages are being served at a reasonable speed, and so on, it's not going to work. You have to get that technology platform right. Greatest content on the wrong platform is not going to index, period. And the future really isn't human versus robot. The future is human with robot. And it's understanding the way these things are working together that will elevate your content. Because most people are either writing for robots, they're trying to game the system, or they're writing for humans, not understanding how their algorithms work. Understanding both and combining the way you write, the way you present the content online is going to elevate you above people who don't do both. So it's really important to understand that you've got to work with the robots and humans. I mentioned earlier that there was an article that I wrote, which is just being published on our own website, which is all about marketing for robots, and we can include a link in the show notes for that. So my advice would be also to go and take a look at that article, have a read through. It's probably a 10-minute read, 15 minutes tops, and it will give you a really good overview of the things we've been talking about today. At the end of that article, it gives you the opportunity to take a quiz, which is kind of like a little audit of where you are. It's, I think, 15 questions in total. It takes 3 or 4 minutes to complete. It's multiple choice, so it's really easy to run through. And when you've completed that, we will send you an email, which will give you a better idea of what your website's currently doing and the level of expertise that you currently have and your ability to move forward with this. So that's a really helpful guide that you can look at. And again, you got the opportunity there to get in touch with us. You can book an appointment with one of our growth specialists to find out what else can be done to help your business grow in this important sector.
For any people listening to this that have thought, okay, I understand the value of working sort of with the robots and the humans to help grow my business, what should be the next thing they do?
Clearly, most people, unfortunately, will not have the expertise to do this. And it's not that they can't learn it. It's all out there. We can understand it. We can fathom it out. However, most people are experts in what they do for their own business. And so my advice with all these things is to work with an agency that has experience and can demonstrate actually results in this arena. Because there are many agencies out there that will claim, oh, we understand SEO, we understand what to do. And that, this is smoke and mirrors, and we'll do some work and your website will start to perform better. SEO results, provided the website is technically correct, SEO results can be reasonably quick. Again, there are other factors at play. If it's a brand new business, then again, that might impact things because there's no authority. But given that, everything has been around for a while, and you're just not indexing as the way you want to, my advice is to get in touch. Get in touch with us, talk to us. You can come straight through to the SEO team, and we can talk to you about how we can look at your website. We can do a scan. We can then advise you on what you need to do, and you either go away and do that yourself, or you work with someone like us to do it for you. Most people who try and do this themselves, frankly, fail. And I'm not saying that's every case, but they still do not have all the experience that we have as an agency to understand what really needs to happen here. And we can take a look at any website, we can scan it, we can come back with a report which is honest. It's not us saying this is what's happening. This is the authority in the scan world of websites, if you like, that we use, the top software to scan the website, and basically we can explain to you how search engines are viewing your content, and we can tell you what's indexing and what isn't indexing. We can then advise you on what needs to happen to change that. And your best option is to work with an agency like us. We'd be delighted, obviously, to talk to people where we can actually go through bit by bit and fix everything. In some cases, we recommend starting over. The website might be very old, outdated. It doesn't even explain who you are and what you do anymore. Your content might not be relevant. So it's a good time to maybe start over. But in a lot of cases, we've also got people that have got up-to-date websites that are relatively new, but just aren't indexing. We can tell you why not. And it's understanding why not is your first point of call. And then moving forward, you need to understand how to write that content for the robots and humans. And if you don't know how to do that, again, you need to work with an agency that has demonstrated its ability to do that. And that's the important thing. So my advice is get in touch. We can help.
Thanks again to Paul for joining us today. It's been wonderful to have you in the studio and for you to share your experience with us on the show. Visit qbd.co.uk/powwow to enjoy more of our content and contact details on how you can connect with Paul. All the links are in the show notes. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast so others can enjoy our content on digital marketing. I look forward to joining you again on the QBD podcast, the Marketing PowWow.
The QBD podcast.
Marketing PowWow.